Let's straight go to panel discussion on whose economy is it anyway. Lord Begnath Desai talks to Sanjeev Sanyal, Principal Economic Advisor, Government of India.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned that the British did a bunch of things in order to fundamentally change the nature of their bureaucracy. So it would be very interesting for us to know, one, what did they do? Two, what went well? And what did we learn? And what went wrong as well?
Absolutely. You know, one of the things we already started to a certain extent is there are a lot of talent in the private sector. And there are a lot of talent in public sector. But there should be a lot of exchange between public sector and private sector. You know, Nandan Nilekani is a very good example of somebody who came in from the private sector and tackled the most difficult problem of the Aadhaar card. Can you imagine what would have happened had it been done entirely by the IAS? We would have had a huge mess. You would have had to fill out lots and lots of forms and all that. Nandan Nilekani did it in a very, very efficient way. So that should be a lesson, that all wisdom and all efficiency is not in the IAS. I mean, they're nice people. I have nothing against them. Some of my relations are IAS. But I think we have to be able to use the quality and talent of people in the private sector, because they go through a much harder system to survive and prosper than the government system does. They take the risk. They are the risk takers. And I think one thing I would like all political parties, this is not a partisan issue, all political parties to learn to respect business more. You know, to learn to respect private sector more, to know that by and large, if they were not in government, they would be in the private sector. There's no other way to live. And also I think we have to be able to say that if you take a risk, sometimes you have to suffer the consequences. There's no way that a government can stop you from having all risks. Not all deaths by farmers should be forgiven. You know, farmers' debts are forgiven, but if I'm a chowkidar in a city, and if I have a mortgage debt, I'm not going to be able to forgive. They say, tum kisan nahi, tum to chowkidar ho. Sorry, I said chowkidar because not for any other political reasons. You know, an industrial worker in a city doesn't get his debts forgiven. Why should farmers get forgiven? And we have to examine, why did you take the risk? Did you take the proper risk? Did you do anything? So I think we have to stop this idea that Sarkar will take care of everything as long as you do what the Sarkar tells you. I think we have to release the energy of the Indian people who are very enterprising and very good. I'm sorry. I'll continue to speak if you don't stop me. No, I think we have to get the sense that there are, in Asia, in 1947, India, if you believe this, had the highest per capita income. Japan had been destroyed by the war. China was also destroyed. At that time, countries like Korea or Indonesia or Malaysia were much poorer. And Korea especially had a war, got divided into North Korea, South Korea. We're talking about partition, Korea was divided much more brutally than India and Pakistan were divided. Korea today is 20 times richer than India in per capita income terms. How did they do it? They did it by a very simple idea that the government said to the business people, if you do well, we will subsidize you. If you export and sell abroad, we will give you interest rate subsidy, not otherwise. And for 60 years continuously, Korea has had a growth rate of more than 6%. South Korea. Same thing about Singapore. You know, what they call Asian tigers doesn't include India. The Asian miracle doesn't include India. India somehow stayed back because we thought, no, we can't trust business. Remember Nehru saying to Tata, J.R.D. Tata, Jay, don't tell me about profits, it's a dirty word. And he literally thought that profits came out of cheating or exploitation or monopoly power. No idea that this is how people make the living around the world. The farmer is a businessman, he's private sector. The farmer has to take a risk and the farmer will get the reward. But if farmer is a good private sector, what's wrong with the other private sector? So we have to be able to again and again change the mindset.
So I agree with you that the state needs to withdraw in India. We have done this so reluctantly, but we have withdrawn, I think, slowly and steadily.
The closest we came was under the Vajpayee government. The Vajpayee government disinvested as much as possible, and the whole story of mobile telephony was done in Vajpayee times, and the development was left to the private sector rather than the government. And you can imagine how much liberating the whole mobile telephony, internet has been to India. And that's only because the Planning Commission did not list that as a priority in his 5-year plan. Thank God. You see, that industry, the software industry and Bollywood are the only two truly global industry because the Planning Commission ignored them.
Well, at least the good news is there's no such thing as a planning commission anymore. And we have dismantled it completely. But now, I think one of the things that will come through even in the budget you would have seen, we are now no longer a country that is apologetic about the word privatization.
Sure.
And in fact, balancing the books going forward in the next few years will depend significantly upon actual privatization. The minister in charge of civil aviation has clearly come out and said, we are going to sell Air India in the next few months.
Sure.
So some progress is being made in terms of taking the whole matter and becoming far less apologetic about this whole thing than we were. Therefore, the idea that somehow the public sector was something that was serving the public, now we have also understand that it is also the public that owns it and subsidizes it when it doesn't do well. It is taxpayers' money that keeps a lot of this stuff alive. So when we say public sector, we have to also take into account the fact that the public sector is what is financing or bearing the burden of them, not just...
Absolutely.
So now, however, having said that, there are things that the state does have to do.
Oh, yeah.
Now, obviously, there are things like, for example, infrastructure, etc. But I think there needs to be a national debate about one thing, which is a very core thing that the state should do, but we tend not to do it well, which is contract enforcement and the judicial system, which are basically the same thing. And my own view is that this is now the single biggest constraint to economic activity in this country. So as somebody who works in the government, I see this all the time. We end up having to write these convoluted rules because we somehow function under the logic that the legal system will not really deliver in the end. In any other country, we would have simply had a simple rule and that said, yes, there will be some exception which will end up in the court and something relatively quickly will work out of it. But in India, because we assume that the court will not function within a reasonable time frame, we then have to spend enormous energy in trying to write about the exceptions and exemptions in the system. And very quickly, the rules and laws and policies become very, very complicated. So it's a price we pay at every step of the way. So this, I think, is something, I don't know if you agree, but this is something we really need to do.
Absolutely. Let me put it this way. On one hand, we have amazing respect for the judiciary, especially apex judiciary. It's all about the Constitution, rights, and all that. Be that as it may. In terms of financial transaction, settling bills, collecting debts, and so on. We have the most expensive judicial system that there is. If you are a person renting your flat to somebody else, you know you won't get it back. You know you won't.